So, scaling your AI in the real world. Myself and Steve and FormusPro have run a series of webinars over the last, probably the last 12 months, actually, to be honest with you, about adopting AI. We've worked about how to reduce stress in the non-profit space with AI, how to avoid burnout, hearts and mind adoption, how to clean up your data. A lot of what we have focused on is early pilots. What we've not really done is gone, great, you've done your early pilots. What's next and how to go about that, which is what today is about. So my name's James. I am, there's a transition there, head of marketing at FormusPro, and my lovely colleague is Steve Stiles. Hey,
Hi.
say hi,
Yeah.
Steve.
Steve, I'm a business development manager for the non-profit sector. So I've spent about 6-7 years so far working in that space, and hopefully can share the knowledge I've accumulated with all of you.
And FormusPro, because you're probably wondering who the heck FormusPro is. We were founded in the UK in 2012, but now operate in both the US and the UK. And we were founded with a unique goal, which was to service the non-profit sector. Our founder and still CEO, Glenn, didn't like how a lot of non-profits were being treated sort of 12, 15 years ago. So deliberately founded FormusPro to, I don't want to say target's the wrong word, but to make sure vertical is the only market that FormusPro were interested in at the time. We've obviously divested since then, but about 50% of our clients are still non-profit and always will be. A lot of our staff come to work with us because of the work we do and the logos we carry with non-profits, and we are always happy to match Microsoft's non-profit discounting. I think, Steve, you'll happily agree with me here. There's a lot of our commercial clients that would give their right arm to access both Microsoft's and our discounts for non-profits.
Oh, yes.
And in fact, we'll show you a couple of logos in a minute, but many of the non-profits we've worked with over the years are still with us, including our very first client ever, Anthony Nolan, the blood cancer charity. So what do we actually do? This is just where we underscore our knowledge. So we do it all. We're a one-stop shop for the Microsoft tech stack. We do enterprise level development. We've obviously increased our data and AI platform to where we're quite happy to say we're specialists. We do a lot of consultancy work, pre-development. A lot of people tend to find us with Project Rescue, and this goes back to where we were talking about how non-profits can be treated in the sector. Sometimes you'll take on some Microsoft technology, it won't be implemented right, or it will, but the hearts and minds behind it weren't handled right, and it just sits there unused. A lot of our clients come as sort of project rescues and stick with us then through the continuous improvement afterwards. We do obviously tech support, because it's not just a once and done and then leave you. We offer software training. Steve, do you want to talk through system health check and continuous improvement? Because I know that's a big part of what you do.
Yeah, something we're doing a lot at the moment, actually, because I think the time of year and planning for next year are system health checks. So they're a sort of free service we offer where we come in, have a look at your Microsoft systems and or third-party systems, tell you what we think's working well and is aligned with Microsoft best practices and best practices for architecture and development, and just give you our recommendations on what the next steps are, what's the best path forward, what's maybe worth changing before you go further to risk issues later down the line and stuff like that. So at minimum, just leaves you with a good foundation.
And how much did you say that was?
Oh, that was free, James.
That's interesting. Free, you say. And obviously, there's no point just talking talks. We obviously would say it. We're happy to sort of stand by a lot of our clients. So Anthony Nolan, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, a lot of these you may not recognize in the US. Some of them you will. So Rethink Mental Illness, Down Syndromes Association, IIAA. There's a lot there. But before we start, and I promise you, because you're not here to talk about us, you're here to talk about AI. Just want to say a quick thank you to Microsoft Elevate for helping to organise this. Part of the Microsoft philanthropy arm, so they themselves operate as a non-profit. This is why we work so closely with Microsoft. They want to empower every person, every organisation on the planet to achieve more. Elevate is what was TSI earlier this year. So they service the non-profit sector as well as K-12 education, which is anybody below the age of 18. That may not sound like a natural fit, but given their mission of bringing the power of AI to social impact organizations and educational institutions everywhere, when you think about it, actually bringing up the next generation of children within AI and then the impact organizations of the non-profit sector, it actually makes a lot of business sense. And I call them a business. They are actually a non-profit themselves. So every bit of money they make from licensing, from software sales, from consultancy, it all gets plowed back into the non-profit and K-12 sector in the forms of discounts, in the forms of free software giveaways, and quite a lot there. And again, I'll share all these slides, so we will give away a lot of these. We'll send out these slides out as we go. To the end of the day for me and Steve, so apologies if I skip a couple of these and miss over. So let's get started. Why are we all here today? And I kind of want to frame today slightly differently. As I said, we've been talking a lot about what AI is capable of and starting pilot projects, but it's in this kind of weird but incredibly fascinating space where it's both completely overhyped, but also massively underused. And I'm trying to think of at any point in history something that has been so overhyped and so underused at the same time, and it's kind of hard to picture anything else. Leaders have all seen the headlines, your staff have seen the demos, everyone's quietly suspecting the same thing, that this could be really awesome for our organization if only we knew how to use it. And the truth is, most organizations aren't struggling with the AI itself, they're struggling with the use cases. So we get the technology, we've used ChatGPT, we're using Copilot, but what's the next step? How do I become an AI first culture?
That sort of the question is exactly what I'm seeing in a load of our conversations that we're having with non-profits at the moment. It's like people are obviously excited, but just unsure where to start. So we're seeing a lot of pockets of really good work and good use cases, but it isn't necessarily spreading. And leaders often want structure before they commit to bigger steps, which is something that has been quite difficult to define with something so unexplored as AI. But yeah, organizations really just want to move forward without feeling like they're jumping into something chaotic, I think.
For me, Steve, and I don't know if you agree or not, but where technology fails isn't or scale doesn't scale correctly. When I talk about failing, it's not actually because of the technology itself. Technology doesn't scale because it's clever. It scales because it feels safe, useful, and normal to the people that use it. So what I'm saying there is, if your AI feels complicated, people are going to avoid it. If it feels risky, your leaders aren't going to touch it. If it feels poorly I guarantee governed, your compliance team is going to shut it straight down. So actually, a big part of what we're going to be talking about today, and a big part of how you can safely scale AI, is very much about removing the anxiety around it, both from your volunteers, your staff, your compliance teams, and your leadership teams. What we want to do is give people clarity, a sense of control, and probably a few early wins, just so adoption becomes more natural.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of theory around AI, and we'll go through some theory behind like your people and your processes and everything like that, and set the foundations. But then we actually want to give you some practical steps and advice, maybe based on things in the Microsoft ecosystem and just generally in the sector, stuff that we've seen working well that you could try to just get the next step going.
So hopefully by the end of the hour, you should know two things, and that is what responsible scaling looks like in the real world, and what your next few steps should be. It may be that you can do those yourselves. It may be you need a consultancy organization, but we will give you the steps. So if you want to try and work through them, you can. You absolutely go for it. A big part of what we do is just handing out the knowledge for free. We're here if you want some help. Otherwise, we're happy to support you with it. The non-profit reality. Where are we right now? And this is very much aimed at the non-profits I've spoken to, and I know Steve's using his own experience this, but when I've been speaking to non-profits about how they're using AI right now, I keep noticing the same pattern again and again and again. And it's not really about the technology at all. It's about their staff and volunteers' behavior. I am seeing a lot of pilots flourishing, really, and I think that's because pilots feel safe. They're small, they're low risk, they're contained. It's kind of like here's my non-profit, here's a sandbox environment, and I'm going to go and test over here. Now that's great until you try and move back out of the sandbox, and then suddenly everyone's going, whoa, no, that's too risky. We can't put that organizational wide. And it kind of stops feeling playful and fun. It moves it past the point where people are going, oh, look at this funny image I've generated with AI. And suddenly it's actually, we've got some sensitive data. I don't think you should be doing that, which isn't great for scaling.
That's right. That example of seeing a lot of good pilots, but not quite stretching out to the wider organisation. We're seeing that a lot at the moment. So there's a few non-profits that we've seen with one or two great pilots happening, usually powered by one or two enthusiastic champions, so like staff members or volunteers that are quite personally interested in AI, maybe used it a lot in their home lives, but everything's sitting in isolation. So it's great, but you can't build an organisation-wide approach on that, on enthusiasm alone. So you need to have some structure to the scaling, and we'll talk you through hopefully how you can start thinking about that.
Your pilots, they almost feel like a controlled experiment, right? You don't have to worry about governance. You don't have to worry about cross-team adoption or whether your data is in the right shape. It's just this isolated bubble. And then the CEO sort of walks on going, great, how do we expand this sort of company wide? And suddenly it's like, I'm not sure. And actually, that's actually a big problem, because one of the quirks I've always found with human nature is that we love finding local workarounds. A local workaround feels innovative, but those workarounds fall apart the minute you try to scale them without the right grounding.
And that's exactly where most non-profits hit the wall. They'll have the strong pockets of activity in the pilots, but without the shared approach, they haven't got any common definitions of what good AI looks like, or what types of prompts they should be inputting, or responses they should be getting, or stuff that they should and shouldn't use these tools for. And so there's no way for all the other teams to copy the good work that the team piloting the AI is doing without completely reinventing the wheel every time.
And this is where a lot of the tension, I think, comes from, because the leadership teams, they can see the potential, as can the volunteers and staff. So your leadership teams are going, yeah, I can kind of see this, but whereas your teams are sort of going, wow, this is awesome, I'm using this already. How do we expand this sort of wider? And there's that gap in the middle where nobody's quite sure what to do about it. And actually, it's only been around since 2000. I was using this stat earlier, but it's only been around since November 2022 when OpenAI launched. It's 3 years this month, which is just crazy to think about. But this year in particular, I think, has changed. It's gone from a weird little chatbot experiment to, wow, this is actually something quite serious. And Copilot, I feel, and hands on, cards on the table, I am a Microsoft partner, so we do work with Microsoft, but I do think Copilot has changed a lot of this in the last 12 months. It's gone from a shiny new toy that people were kind of playing with, kind of experimenting with, especially with agentic AI, to something where staff now just expect it to be part of their daily work, are asking the question, why aren't we using the AI for this?
And that is exactly what I'm hearing at the moment with a lot of non-profits, is their staff are crying out for more AI and more ways to reduce their manual workload, but and many of them using it informally, often without checking with their employer, or without necessarily operating in the guardrails of any policies you might have. But they're already drafting emails, turning notes into reports, summarizing meetings, and none of that is coming from a formal rollout, but it is coming from curiosity, which is really good because it's the fuel you need for this. But it's great until governance tries to catch up and then realizes everyone's moved ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's the bit that certain sort of like leadership boards need to grasp, is that people aren't going to wait for permission to use these tools. These tools make their lives easier, so they are going to use them whether you say yay or nay. I mean, it's the same reason everyone was using WhatsApp for business before WhatsApp even released WhatsApp for business. It was easier and it made their lives easier, so they used it. And then suddenly organizations everywhere were scrambling, going, oh, we need a WhatsApp policy. And WhatsApp actually instituted sort of double-ended encryption. AI is kind of in that same phase where your staff, whether you think it or not, they're using it, but you need to catch up to make sure your governance and your scalability is right.
That's the sort of thing that does put leaders in a tricky spot, though, isn't it? Because like the board are asking for direction, staff want clarity, and they're using this stuff anyway. Teams are already producing AI-generated work that no one's quite sure how to assess or approve. So it's like it's not a nice to have governance. It then becomes something you suddenly needed yesterday.
It's an essential, and it is leaving huge gaps. And when we all ask organizations where they are with AI, I think, as I already said, the most common response is, yeah, we've done a few pilots, we've got a couple of people who are really into it, but we're not quite sure what's next. And that is normal, because the truth is pilots are deceptive. They do give you this weird sense of progress that perhaps it isn't earned. It's genuine, but they don't. The pilots aren't. They're just showing you the good side. They're not showing you the gaps, the problems, the bits that are going to sort of wake you up at 3 a.m. and go, oh my God, we've just leaked this bit of data that we shouldn't. Or do you know what? We've just put our CEO's salary online. Pilots don't tell you that. And it's not until you hit the scaling sort of issues that they really reveal themselves.
When you're doing these things in isolation, you often find that you have one team doing amazing things with AI, usually again because you've got one or two of those champions that's really taken to it. But then you look outside that bubble and there's no structure, no shared approach. So other teams are going to want to, leverage the fantastic work that team has done with AI. But if there's no shared approach and therefore no knowledge transfer, it's like, well, they've got to build it from scratch, the same when they want to do it every time. So yeah, a lot of the advantages of stuff like scaling it effectively is that you can just reduce doing the same work over and over again and just take the good bits that everyone's already done and just spread that to everyone else who would benefit from it.
And I think a big part of this is that most pilots don't require any kind of level of maturity. All it says, and it was a great word that you used earlier, all it says is all it requires is enthusiasm. Scaling is a different beast, though, because it requires a shared understanding of what's allowed, what's safe. And this is the big one. What's your definition of good? Because that's going to change from organization to organization. What data do you trust? What do you not? And how do you measure success? Because actually a big part of scaling is going, right, we're going to scale this now, and this is what success will look like. Because if you don't sort of set that first, well, how do you know if you've actually achieved it or not? And the money that you've invested in scaling, how do you know if that was spent well or not?
That's right. And then the point at which teams start to drift apart, you've got the super users who are miles ahead, but then everyone else is not only being left behind, but then starting to feel unsure or overwhelmed or waiting for leadership to set the direction. And that's a gap that just gets longer, bigger, the longer you leave it. The real issue, and I think it starts with momentum. The momentum's there, but it's just not connected. And when things aren't connected, they don't scale. So we want to kind of talk to you about how these isolated sparks of enthusiasm you can use them to light the whole fire instead of them being kind of all there and everywhere like they are at the moment for many non-profits.
So that's the theory behind scaling, but what should it actually look like in your organization? Because especially with a non-profit, when a lot of people hear the word scaling, they assume it means doing more pilots, more tools, more projects. But that doesn't always be the case. Scaling shouldn't be about quantity. That can be a part of it, and fingers crossed will be. But actually, when we're talking scaling, what we're talking about is maturity. It's about creating an environment where your AI isn't this special project that, Tim's really keen on AI, we'll get him doing this. What it's actually about is it just gets the work done on a day-to-day basis, and it's an everyday tool for everyone and everyone feels safe using it.
That's it. And that where we're seeing AI working really well in the sector is where it almost feels normal. Like it's not flashy. People are just incorporating it within their day-to-day lives, whether it's just writing up notes or tidying up reports or summarizing emails missed after hours of meetings. It's just those cumulative little things. That's what AI is really great for in the generative form. And so, yeah, that's what it looks like. That's what good AI looks like in one form that we're seeing at the moment working well.
Yeah, just it's that culture of AI first and making it look normal. So we promised you some practical steps, and we're going to try and live up to that. There are some basics. At its very, very simplest level, scaling AI is always going to come back to these three things: your people, your processes, and your data. You can add as many layers to that, of complexity to that as you want. You can throw in your governance, you can throw in your hearts and minds projects, you can do this, you can do that, you can be as technical you want, you can be as no code, low code as you want. These three things are the core. And if you take nothing away but this is how this is how you scale.
Yeah, a very important thing about these things though are they're not three separate boxes to tick. They're
No.
constantly feeding into each other. So if your people don't feel confident, your processes won't be followed. Processes aren't clear, your data gets messy. Your data gets messy, you can't use AI as well as you could because it becomes unreliable. So everything's connected, which in some ways makes it challenging, but in others makes it a real opportunity actually.
It's lucky I wrote that in a circle then, really, isn't it? But people thrive within a nonprofit when things feel stable and predictable. And I'm going to be using some horrible words here because I'm a writer, sort of like, by trade. I'm head of marketing, but my background is in writing, and I hate words like stable and okay and predictable, and because they sound boring and dull. But the reality is the 9 to 5 grind can be a grind. Nobody works for a non-profit because they want to become a millionaire. They do it because they want to change the world. But while they're doing that, they want to feel safe. And to do that, you need to feel that their role is stable and secure. And so being asking them to test stuff constantly almost becomes a bit of a chore. What we need to do is make AI stop feeling like we don't know if this is going to work. Can you test it? I know you're busy, but test this. And if it goes wrong, do it all again manually. What they need to know is actually this is going to work. And that's where scaling helps with this.
And then if you link it all to your mission, like every team doing it in unison or just having governance over this, that obviously makes scaling easier. But just like everyone kind of being bought in, seeing the wins of their work and the outcomes, and obviously linking it to your charity goals, that is how people are really going to get empowered with this sort of stuff. And then the loop becomes easier and easier, because I think that a big thing I'm seeing nonprofits maybe get a bit wrong is with their pilots, they're focusing on things like external donor use cases, but they're the ones that are high risk because that's like sensitive data that can't get out. You can't be wrong in your response to a donor. So just starting with those internal use cases around like saving some time on some admin, that will make your users so much happier, because then they'll have more time to spend talking to the donors. Whereas if you automate the donor communications, they've got to spend more time doing admin. So it's kind of think of it with that hat on as well. Some of the actually easier, less risky use cases are actually probably the ones that are going to make the users more happy and empowered initially.
And again, builds your scaling momentum, right?
Yeah.
So breaking these down, your people, this is going to be both the easiest and the hardest, because when you start talking about scaling, your mind is instantly going to go to the technology. In reality, though, the biggest lever you're going to pull in scaling is your staff and your volunteers, who, please remember, don't get paid and have absolutely no reason to stick around other than they support you. If you start making their lives too hard, I guarantee you they will find another non-profit to give their time to. You see, AI doesn't scale when people are told to use it. It scales when people become comfortable. And another horrible word there, comfortable. Everything just sounds really mediocre. And I hate using I'm honestly, I've done this webinar 2 or 3 times today and I'm cringing inside using it. But it is unfortunately true. People crave safety, and AI scales when people feel safe using it.
Exactly. And that level of detachment is something that we see play out quite a lot, where staff, they want to use these tools because it will make their lives easier, as James said, and they'll have fewer repetition everywhere. But the moment they feel unsure, or if they're dictated to, or if they're worried that they'll make a mistake with it or whatever about the quality of their work, then they're way more likely to freeze up. That's not obviously these are the sorts of people that you need to take on the journey with you, but you need as many, I guess, innovators and creative thinkers in this process as possible, really, and people who are free to take risks with this sort of stuff.
Uncertainty is the enemy of adoption. If your people don't know what's allowed or actually what's risky, if they don't understand what's risky, they're going to default to the safest option, which is doing nothing, or doing stuff well, I've always done it like this. The problem is if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got. And the non-profit sector out there is way too competitive to just rest on your laurels, unfortunately, because there will be a younger, faster, speedier, less technical debt NFP nipping at your heels and sort of eating into your donor base, unfortunately. This isn't it'll be nice. This is you need to adopt this way of working, and you need to make your staff feel secure to just stay relevant, unfortunately.
That's it. But you can remove a lot of this load on people by just giving them some things to start off with, some simple practical guidance, because there's obviously that uncertainty has two sides of the coin. Knowing none of the possibilities can obviously get into paralysis. So something I thought of earlier was just you could use Copilot to create a little onboarding process for new staff or for staff who've just started using AI and volunteers, where it kind of here's what my purpose is. Here are some things you can ask me. Here are some things that you shouldn't ask me. This is the type of data that I have access to, and just like even that alone will start sparking off ideas in people's heads. But just that gives them enough free rein, and there's no red tape there for them to be worried about having to operate within a really strict set of parameters. Like, it gives them freedom, but a little bit of a nudge as well.
Absolutely. So moving on from people to your processes, always a really sexy topic to talk about. Processes. Who doesn't like talking about process, right? Or the creative marketer in the room. I need to make this really clear. When I do say the word process, when I come to scaling, I do not mean bureaucracy. The goal here isn't to create more red tape for people. What we're trying to do is remove ambiguity, because it's ambiguity that causes anxiety. I tell you what, this is got all the big words today. I'm surprised I can get these sentences out. And it is that level of ambiguity, anxiety is what's going to stop people using your AI.
That's it. And then when people don't know the rules as well, they'll do one or two things really, I guess, won't they? They'll either hold back or just rush ahead. Yeah. And just do it. Neither of those things are good. And
not with governance, no.
While clear governance processes don't have to be 50-page, massive things, having some level of cohesion will give people that safe middle ground. Like, they'll know what's acceptable or what's needs sign off or approval and where the boundaries are, but they're not scared that they're going to get sacked or be responsible for a massive data leak or something, because they'll know that they can't. That's not possible with that model you're building, for example.
And sometimes your governance can be as simple as taking people from, I think this might be all right, to, yep, I've checked and I definitely know this is okay. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, really. People like predictable systems. If they know what's happening when they create a report with Copilot, or how to get a workflow approved, or who to ask when they're unsure, all the stuff that your governance team is going to be completely used to, then their willingness to experiment is going to dramatically increase.
Yep. And then it will just spread across the teams then, because once one group has a process that works, others copy it. You start to see the same good patterns and same standardized approaches showing up in other areas like fundraising and casework and HR. And talking about a bit of practical advice for sort of governance processes with AI, one of the things we're doing with a few nonprofits at the moment, because obviously a lot of charities have ideas about initial use cases, but perhaps not necessarily where to start. But other charities haven't even thought of the use cases yet. So we're working with a few nonprofits to actually help them establish those use cases by talking to them about what's your high impact areas, your challenge areas, what's the least sensitive stuff. And then as the Copilot Microsoft experts, but not their process experts, we're helping them define possible use cases that will actually make a difference and set some good foundations. So it's a good idea to work with a technology expert like us or another version of us or Microsoft, establish together the use cases, the initial group of super users, arrange how often you're going to play back and review the progress you've made so far. That needs to be a priority all the time. But certainly I think for governance processes around scaling AI, definitely kind of consult expert advice around this sort of stuff, and there'll be some best practices maybe, or some gotchas that you might not necessarily know about, and that would really help.
Yeah. And I would never, ever, ever contradict a colleague in public, but I'm assuming when you said work with ourselves or another partner, you actually meant work with ourselves, right?
I have to stay unbiased, James.
Are you trying to stay neutral?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Well, let's move on then from Steve's neutrality to data, because that's just an awesome topic, right? Depends how geeky you are on and technical you are on the call, really. If we sort of put people and processes in one corner and go, right, that's setting the culture for AI, your data is the thing that's going to determine if any of it actually works. It's quite an important foundation. And again, there's a bit of a behavioral angle here, though, because people will trust the tools where the information it produces feels consistent, predictable, and sensible. I guarantee you, your teams that are using AI at the moment, they'll have used it thousands of times and it will have worked perfectly, but it's the one time it gave them a stupid answer that they go around going, this is AI's rubbish. You look at what it's just done. I was asking it for a recipe and it told me to cook horse or something stupid, but the thousands of other times they've used it perfectly, and that confirmation bias is really tricky.
I think one thing that gets a lot of organizations to that place, though, of trusting it and then suddenly it does something that makes them lose their trust is that we see a lot of great pilots being run of AI, but they're pulling from a local spreadsheet or someone's shared drive or a database that no one else uses. So that's obviously going to work great, and that's good for establishing the workflow or the actual business process that AI is fulfilling. But it completely falls apart when you try and scale it because it then isn't going to be run on high quality data. So certainly getting your data right, and that's something that can start small. So a bit of advice on that, and I would do this now. I wouldn't wait for any actual starting of any AI rollouts or initiatives. Just start creating an area where maybe a SharePoint library or a database where it's locked down and you're just feeding not your organizational intelligence into it, your policies, procedures, like your tones, whatever, so that by the time that you do have your own internal AI model, you actually have quite a big data set to train it from that you trust and that you know it's not going to hallucinate because you've given it the data that it is trained on.
I mean, it sounds like quite a big, complicated topic. Do you think Microsoft are missing a bit of a trick here, Steve? Should they have sort of created any platforms to actually help you with your data, maybe?
I think I know where you're going with this, James.
I mean, why is unified data so important, and why haven't Microsoft created anything to help with this?
But they have.
Wow, that was well timed. That was almost like we'd planned this.
So yeah, I mean, having a single source of truth about your data is something that I think no one doesn't aspire to achieve. And Microsoft obviously have a lot of tools to help towards that, but that coincides with how you can leverage Copilot or use Copilot appropriately as well. So something
Tell us
like
about the tools, Steve.
I shall. Something like Dataverse. A lot of you probably be familiar. It kind of sits under your Microsoft 365 and Dynamics and Power Platform apps if you've got that sort of stuff. Microsoft Fabric is great for when you need to pull that data from loads of different systems, not just Microsoft, clean it all up automatically and report on it all in a nice dashboard with lots of different data sources. And then Purview is an interesting one, not something I'm as familiar with because it's a sort of security thing, but something I saw at a Microsoft event that was really cool is using Copilot in Purview for data loss prevention. So I saw a demo where a couple of people were working on a shared document that wasn't sensitive. Someone put a credit card number into that document and then immediately, automatically, Copilot in Purview detected that was a confidential piece of information, automatically raised the level of access permissions needed for a user to be able to view that document. So
I didn't know Purview could do that. Can we do a live demo, Steve? Get your credit card out. We'll put the number in on screen.
I don't think we've accounted for the time for a live demo today.
No, we're a bit ahead of time. I'm sure we can. Pull up your Purview instance. Thumbs up, everyone who wants Steve's credit card. No, we've got a very honest audience, Steve. You're okay. But again, see, I work in marketing, so my role isn't as technical as Steve's, but I deal a lot more with the psychology of the people. And actually, Dataverse, Fabric, and Purview can actually change people's behavior. And that's because it stops them second guessing their answers. AI is fantastic, but if you're trying to scale it and you've got somebody going, well, AI's said this, I just need to go check it. AI's done this, I'm just going to need to double check it. You're not actually saving any time. You may be sort of like slowing everyone down. So your leadership team is going to feel more comfortable. Your staff are going to feel safer using AI because they know the information behind it is governed properly. And Microsoft have done a lot of the heavy lifting for you. They've put all the governance in place. All you need to do is click download, install, and start setting it up. It's a bit more complicated than that, and you may need a partner, FormusPro, but actually you can go and experiment with this stuff with yourself. So bringing it back to your staff, because this is a huge, and I know it feels like we're belaboring the point a little bit, but it is a huge part of this. You have to empower your staff, but more importantly, you have to empower your volunteers. It's easy to slip into conversations when scaling about your platforms, about your governance, about Purview, about Dataverse. But the real magic, at least from my point of view, is the part that actually changes your staff's day-to-day experiences. The bit where they go home going, wow, I had a really good day today. I know this is going to sound weird, but you'll never guess what I managed to do. And ultimately, if AI isn't making their days easier, what are you doing? What's the point? Because nothing else matters. Empowerment is far more a powerful motivator than enforcement. Sort of telling yourself you will do this it's only going to take you so far, but actually making their lives easier so they want to keep pushing harder for you. People don't use not on a full-time basis, a permanent basis. They don't adopt these tools because they're told to. They adopt them because they feel better about themselves. They feel more capable in their own roles when they use them.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that really fuels scaling and adoption, in my opinion, of this sort of stuff. As you can see it in people's faces, the relief when an AI tool has just saved them half an hour on something that they would have had to do manually before. So for frontline teams, especially volunteers, that's huge, because it not only turns it from an abstract idea into something actually helpful, but then it just attaches emotion, relief to this sort of thing. And well, we want more of that, so let's go all in.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just saving half an hour's worth of time. I mean, you can sometimes spend like half a day. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, it'd have taken me a day or two to put an entire webinar together. Copilot can do it, as you say, in a half hour. Probably shouldn't say that, right? Moving on. So where should we be using AI? And it's absolutely not PowerPoint. When we do talk to non-profits, we ask them where they think AI fits within their organization. And it makes us a little bit sad because they'll always jump straight into the big strategic ideas. Well, I'm not doing it yet, but I could be doing it with fundraising, right? Let's go and speak to the fundraising team and we'll automate the whole process. Could we optimize all our programs for it? What about donor management? What about grant management? Can it transform our entire organization? And the answer is yes. And I love the enthusiasm, but let's just take it a step or two back. The real value for a lot of AI is in the small everyday tasks, the things people have to do on repeat 10, 20, 100 times a day or a week. And those are always going to be the easiest places both to build AI and to speed up your scaling, because the impact is immediate, the risks are much lower, and your staff are going to be a lot happier about it.
And that's the sort of thing that will directly support your business case for AI as well, because all these little manual tasks that are being automated, all that cumulative time that's being saved, the amount of non-profits I've spoken to who just aren't tracking that. And you track collectively, say your fundraising team, just how much time do you think per week that you save either using our AI tools or just AI tools at home? And then per person, calculate that, and then lo and behold, you're already saving a load of money without actually having invested in any AI tools. How much money, therefore, could you be saving, and how much time could you be saving, and how much more one-to-one engagement can you actually be unlocking for your supporters as well? And so that's some good metrics for a business case that often, I think, go unrealized in the sector at the moment.
No, 100%. And the flip side of that is actually you want to keep that momentum going again. And the psychology behind it is if somebody spends 5 minutes doing something today, or sorry, it spends 5 minutes, it saves them 5 minutes today, they're probably going to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes doing it tomorrow because it saves them exponentially 20, 30, 40 minutes. But if a project takes them a half hour today, they're not going to spend even 5 minutes going, could I have done that faster? Because it's just done and move on. When you save people time, they're more likely to come back to it. But if your governance is set up in a way, if your scaling processes are set up in such a way that they're taking up more of people's times, they're just not going to bother. And you end up with a load of scary shadow IT where you've set all these processes up, but actually people are doing something completely different, which we both see far too often, don't we, Steve?
Yes, and that's why the consistency is even more key. Everyone's using these AI for these common tasks, and if that old adage of shadow IT, we've seen that a whole lot, and I mean, there's so many things there. Shadow IT means you're duplicating work potentially. You're not sharing information. You're mismatching processes. So
you've got no idea what risks you're taking because you don't know where it is. But moving on, we're going to stray into the realms of theory here slightly, where Copilot goes next. And I'm not, we know Microsoft well, but I'm certainly not chatting to their CEO daily. So I don't know what they've got planned for Copilot over the next 12, 24, 36 months. But one of the biggest misconceptions about AI, and this is why I'm talking about Copilot here, is that what we're seeing today is the finished product. It's like, oh, this is great. I'm going to use this for the next 10 years. It is not. We are at the very, very, very beginning of a really shallow curve that's going to get very steep. And actually, a huge part of that is Copilot is going to get very personalized and a lot more contextual. So what do I mean by that? It's going to come up over in the next few years, and he's already starting to do it with something called role-specific intelligence. So your AIs, and especially your Copilot agents, will understand what your fundraiser is trying to do and how your fundraiser works. They'll understand what a caseworker is doing and what they need. They'll understand a HR worker's goal. It will come, but these agents will come with that context. Everybody sort of started out using ChatGPT, and it was great because it was just you use ChatGPT and that's it. And one of the criticisms I hear about Copilot is, well, it's a bit fragmented, isn't it? You've got sort of like, there's a Copilot button here on Excel, there's a Copilot here for PowerPoint, Teams has a Copilot, and Dynamics 365 has a Copilot, and GitHub has a Copilot, and then we're meant to be making our own Copilot agents in Studio. And that's not a complaint. That's actually its strength, because you can create really, really specific use cases with really, really specific contextual behavior for the people that are actually using it.
And then when as I think a sector, we do move more towards agentic AI more seriously. Obviously, that's when we start talking about automated process, where the co-pilots aren't just generating content, but they're actually carrying out multi-step tasks and processes. But that's where those fragmented models all start coming together, because when you have a point where, say, you've got a fundraising agent and a finance process agent, they can start handing off to each other and stuff like that. So it's I think with all IT projects, and probably many of us in the sector will have experienced a bad CRM implementation or a bad kind of cloud migration. What are the common themes? Didn't do enough planning, didn't do enough evaluation at the start, didn't define your outcomes or do your plan. So this stuff, it might take more time than you expect, but then the third, fourth, fifth rollout of AI will take half the time every time, because you're not reinventing the wheel every time you do it.
So the goal is obviously governance without fear, and it is, unfortunately, and apologies to anybody who does governance. Is there anybody on the call who actually is directly responsible for governance with their organization? Just drop in the chat if you are. But it is unfortunately one of those words that makes people tense up. It's strict. The perception is it's slow, it's full of forms. But for me, governance when it comes to AI, good governance, isn't about control, it's about confidence. If your people know the boundaries, and again, I'm going to use the safe word, what's safe, what's approved, what's needed to be reviewed, what isn't, what needs human oversight, what doesn't. And that's one of the biggest definitions your your governance should add, is where that level of human oversight, where is that, what can your AI automate and what needs a human to go, yep, that's fine. And that's different for every organization depending on your appetite. That's actually the main goal of your governance. And from there, scaling becomes easy.
Yeah, that's something I think many organizations often misunderstand, is they do think governance is just going to slow things down. But in reality, when it's just clear and simple, then that's far from the case. It's empowering, and it just boosts. But yeah, I mean, look, it boosts trust with staff, because they know that you know that there are risks and that there are parameters that you've got to put in place. But equally, they trust that the freedom that you've given them is protected by these governance processes and practices.
So governance, we said we'd give you some practical steps. So I'm not talking about a 60-page document here. Good governance should be simple, it should be human, and it should be usable, right? It should set the expectations in a way that reduces anxiety and doesn't increase it. People don't need more complexity in their lives. They just want a bit of clarity. And clarity is what is going to shift your culture.
Yeah. And in practice, that means a few things. But firstly, clear rules. Yeah. Written in plain English. Staff should be able to read a one-page guide and understand exactly what's okay, what needs checking, what's off limits. They're not going to read anything more than, a few pages, are they?
No, not at all. So the next step for what good governance looks like should be your ethical guardrails. It's so important for a non-profit that's dealing with sensitive information. The principles that guide how your AI actually should be used, because that's going to be a huge part of your culture in the next few years. And it means, does it mean transparency, fairness, dignity, safeguarding? They're not just legal boxes that you need to tick. They're cultural signals that tell both the people that use your organization and the people that volunteer and work at your organization the kind of non-profit you are. They tell your team, this is the kind of organization we want to be. This is what we're aspiring to, and this is why you should work with us.
And transparent data handling is extremely important, because, not only because of the obvious, but also people need to know where the information's coming from and how it's stored. Like a lot of non-profits who provide healthcare services or housing services or just general welfare services, that the care officers need to be 100% sure that the data they're getting back is verifiable, correct. And so that's the sort of thing I'm saying around kind of building your own libraries and your own intelligence and stuff like that, all aids towards that transparent data handling, not just for external recipients of your services, but also your internal users, for building the trust and confidence in the tools.
Yeah. And finally, you can't do any of this without a review loop. So we've used a couple of sort of, like you saw the big circle examples, and there's a couple more coming up. It's not a once and done. You need adapting governance as you learn. AI is going to keep evolving, which means your document can't just sit in a big book and then never be used. It needs to be a living document that grows with your team, that grows with the technology, that grows with how the world perceives AI. If there's a sudden massive pushback for whatever reason, you're going to need to shift again. And that's when you're trying to scale this, that's the sort of like the real clear path forward. Is it's making sure that review loops are in and being used regularly, not even sort of once every 12 months. It should just be a continuous process. Agreed? Disagree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. It's always nice when I'm on the right track. So the roadmap to scaling, we promised you a couple of tools that you could walk away from this with, and these slides will be sent out to you, so you'll have these. They're quite easy here. Assess, align, unify, safety guard we've already covered, and then improving continuously. So the organizations we speak to, they always think this task is going to be a lot harder than it is. They imagine it's going to be a huge, really dramatic transformation. But the day-to-day reality is scaling's a lot just like building momentum. You're going to take a series of really small, quite sensible steps that actually, once you take it, you're like, oh yeah, why wouldn't we have done that? But they compound over time. And that's interesting, because that level of clarity, that level of Oh yeah, that's just so obvious, is what
Mm.
reduces your people's anxiety. If people can see the journey ahead, if they know what's coming, and if they know those steps are, oh yeah, of course, then there's no ambiguity. And it's the ambiguity that freezes them and the clarity of those steps that's going to free them up.
And that is exactly why having a simple plan or roadmap tied to easy to understand and user impactful outcomes is so important. Like, people need to know what to do first, what to do next, and then what to avoid along the way. A lot of the other stuff is, and especially with something like AI, your roadmap might look completely different in 3 months when Microsoft have decided to change everything. They won't, obviously, but that's a dramatic example. But just there's many reasons to keep it light. Keep light but impactful and meaningful.
Yeah. You start with where you currently are. You assess what's happening today, what's already working, what's not, what pilots have you run, where are your power users, because they're going to be really important going forward. Once you've got that honest sort of picture, you can move on to alignment, I think is next on my table. Yes.
Yeah, and with alignment, AI has to line up with your mission, strategy, governance, and your risk appetite. And if it feels out of sync with some of those values, people will hesitate. If it feels aligned, they're going to lean in.
And sorry, somebody's just dropped in the chat again. Obstacles to scaling, pricey licensing, even for developers. Some of this is expensive, some of it isn't. There are ways to make it cheaper. Microsoft give out huge discounts to non-profits. FormusPro back it up as well. But I understand that when we're talking to the non-profit sector, it very much does depend on the size of your non-profit, and a small sort of like 2-3 person non-profit is always going to have trouble that others won't. But there are ways of doing this cheaper, and there are always ways, and it doesn't matter what the size of your non-profit. Me or Steve are always happy to sort of reach out and have a conversation to see what we can do and help.
On that point a little bit as well, James, sorry.
No, please.
With it being pricey, like, and not having a not-for-profit discount yet on some of these licensing, that is true and frustrating, but it's the harsh reality. I think that other organizations who are maybe paying for it are going to be so much further ahead. And I think a good way to think about it is investment today that will pay for itself and then some later on. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of business cases go through, is focus on, like I said earlier, like all the small little ROI opportunities, like the time saved on manual tasks, but then just look at the bigger picture for all, and tie it to, if we were to improve the way we engage with our donors, then it's likely that we'd get X percentage more engagement and X percentage more funding because we've been able to spend X percent more time with them this year. And it's just, I think, viewing this thing as obviously short-term success is needed, but this isn't going anywhere ever. If anything, it's just going to get bigger and bigger.
I mean, to put it in context, it's kind of going back 30 years going, does the office need computers? It's just, it sounds really cynical and really harsh. The answer was eventually, yeah, you did. And AI governance and AI scaling is unfortunately it's the same kind of thing. I'm aware we've only got a few minutes left, so we promised you a playbook at the beginning of this, and it's one of the things we always get asked. It's like, this is a big, complicated thing. Do you just have a playbook that we can work through? And the answer is, well, I don't, but Steve does, and I've stole his from here. This is a great question, so I stole it. When something feels unfamiliar, people are going to look for patterns, going to look for what the next steps is. Steve's put this together, and actually, I think when it comes to scaling your AI, this is just a really simple and really quick way to do it, and you use it. I don't want to call you away as a tick box exercise, but if you're hitting all these points, you're going to go well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you see, it doesn't. At its basics, it focuses on a few core principles. It's not a great big thick manual. Start small, build repeatable patterns, share early wins and build that confidence. Support your team, not just at launch, but make sure they've got that support as going forwards. And I cannot stress this enough. Train people continuously so skills and capability grow over time. This isn't ever going to be a once and done. You have to keep training people, and you have to continuously improve and reassess these things, right?
Absolutely.
But you've had a lot more hands-on experience than me with this kind of stuff, Steve, because I know you're a lot more directly involved with the sort of the non-profits themselves. So is there anything that we should be looking to avoid?
Yeah, I think one of the pitfalls that comes to mind is I see non-profits running too many pilots. So
Okay.
it feels very productive, but it does actually scatter your efforts, and it's that repetition again. I'm not saying doing more than one is wrong. In many cases, it's probably the best thing to do, but make sure that the efforts that you're putting into each one are complementing each other, because no
Fair
doubt if
point.
you've got 10 pilots running, at least half of them, you probably could have built a lot of the foundational elements all together and saved a load of time. So yeah, try to do too much, and again, without the right level of cohesion and governance, is a big pitfall that we're running into a lot at the moment with non-profits.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to be quite cynical and bring it back to ROI. For me, what to avoid is actually at the very, very, very beginning. Set your targets. So many companies go wrong when they have no shared vision of what good looks like. You need to go right. Well, this is, even if you're continuously improving, even if your goal is never going to end, you still do need to set milestones of what you want to achieve, how much time you want to save, or at least benchmark stuff so you know what money's been saved, how much extra fundraising is being made. If you're not putting those milestones in, you never know if what you're doing is right or wrong.
And then there's also the data challenge. So, or as we often hear it described, data chaos.
Yes.
If teams are pulling from information from loads of different places and different formats, inevitably that you'll get inconsistent results. But as James alluded to earlier, it takes 1 out of 1,000 bad experiences of inconsistent and inaccurate data being fed back to a supporter for the whole reputation of AI to go out of the window.
Yeah, which is, I presume, where we circle back to Dataverse, Purview, and Fabric. So, success in practice. What will success actually, or what should success look like for you? It's going to be easy to get swept up in the hype. It's going to be easy to get swept up in the pressure. Trust me. But real success is, it's a lot more grounded than that. It should feel a lot more human.
Yeah, that's the first sign of success. Like I said earlier, is when what we see in organisations, AI just shows up in everyday work. It's not just some special fancy thing. It's volunteers just use it quietly to save time, or staff use it quietly to prepare updates or tidy up notes. No one makes a big deal out of it. It just becomes normal.
Yeah, and I think the second step, at least in my, it is, if your staff are using it normally as part of their day-to-day, it's their confidence levels. People aren't coming up to you and going, your team stop hesitating. They stop second guessing themselves. They know what's allowed, what's safe, what good looks like. Because of that, they're using AI with intent, not by accident, not because they have to, but deliberately. They'll look at a task and they go, can AI do this better? And it just becomes a standard tool.
And then we see trusted data, not necessarily perfect data. I think that's a good distinction to make, because that doesn't exist, frankly. But reliable, unified, well-governed data, that means AI is giving predictable, consistent answers. When the outputs make sense, that's when trust increases at every level of the organization.
Yeah. And finally, I'm just going to underscore it because we're talking about success. Measurable impact, not vague feelings of progress, real visible improvement, which you have to benchmark from the beginning. Measure your workflows. Are they faster? Are they slower? Clearer reporting. What does your data look like now? What do your reports look like now? Less admin burden, more time spent with beneficiaries, decisions made with more clarity and less stress. All that needs to be benchmarked so you can measure them. That for me is what success looks like, optimizing all this into a non-profit project.
And then when all those pieces come together, everyday use, confident people, trusted data, measurable impact, and then we can all look at an organization at that point and confidently say you're scaling well.
If you want to reach out to myself or Steve, or give FormusPro a follow on LinkedIn, the QR code's there. We're just going to hang around for a minute or two now to see if anybody's got any other questions. Otherwise, we'll get this recording sent out to you all soon, and see you on the next one, and hope you've enjoyed it all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.